Mise-en-scene, translated literally from French as placing on stage, is a term which refers specifically to anything that you can see within the frame. The set decoration, the background, the color of the costumes, the lens flares that J.J. Abrams constantly bombards us with, each and everything that you can see within a frame is the mise-en-scene. A director must choose what to show an audience, but they must also choose how to frame what they show an audience. The shape of the frame is part of the language of film itself, and we call this shape the aspect ratio. 4 years after its initial theatrical release, HBO released Zack Snyder's version of Justice League. I bring up the Snyder Cut because of a curious artistic choice in the presentation of the film. It's 4:3. But what does that actually mean? Now, in the mathematical sense, it means that the width is larger than the height at a ratio of 4 units to 3 units. And if 4:3 sounds familiar, it's because that was the aspect ratio of televisions from their inception through the 2000s before the rise of high definition. The standard television screen these days is 16:9, so for every 16 units of width, you get 9 units of height. But what you might not know is that 4:3 was the standard aspect ratio of film before the invention of sound, which, because of the addition of the optical waveform that was printed on the film strip next to the image, the ratio was changed slightly to what became known as the Academy ratio of 1.37 to 1. Now, at some point, somebody figured out they could bend light into the camera in such a way to get more horizontal image into that same 4:3 frame. And this was known as anamorphic photography. And it had the ability to create an 8:3 ratio. And you make room for an optical audio track and a few other technical elements to help with projection and editing, and you go from 2.66 to 1 to 2.35 to 1. The first iteration of this was known as CinemaScope, and it was not well received by critics. It was seen as a gimmick akin to the 3D films of the same era, the same way we think about 3D films now. Early critics of CinemaScope believed that the edges of the screen were useless, unnecessary space, with the frame far too empty for any serious drama. It was for spectacle. Unfortunately for those critics, widescreen became the norm, and at some point the ratio was changed from 2.35 to 1 to 2.40 to fix some projection artifacts caused by the physical splicing of the film, and 2.40 is still the standard anamorphic ratio of films today. Though CinemaScope itself was replaced by different anamorphic techniques, primarily due to Panavision's superior anamorphic lenses becoming the industry standard, widescreen photography more generally became the preferred format for feature films, because there was another, more crude way of producing widescreen shots. And that's just what I'm doing here. Shooting on a typical spherical lens, i.e. not anamorphic, and lopping off the top and bottom of the frame to create a wider image. You get the widescreen without the hassle of dealing with anamorphic photography. This is called masking, and it is far more common than anamorphic. And it wasn't long after the rise of CinemaScope that this new masking process standardized into a new Academy ratio of 1.85 to 1. Okay, let's play a bit of a game. Here's a shot from the Snyder Cut.
If the fight comes, we'll need you.
Don't count on it, Batman.
Why not?
Because I don't like you coming here, digging into my business, getting into my life. I want to be left alone.
And a shot from Avengers Endgame.
Thank you, Tony. Will you keep that a little quiet? Didn't bring one for the whole team. We are getting the whole team. Yeah? We're working on that right now.
Which of these two images has more visual information? If you said the Snyder Cut, congratulations! Barely. So to fit a video that's 4:3 into a television that's 16:9, you end up with an image that's 1,440 pixels wide by 1,080 pixels tall, which is 1,555,200 pixels, with pillar boxes on either sides of the screen. Most of the MCU is cropped to the anamorphic ratio of 2.40 to 1. A 2.40 image fits into a 16:9 television with a viewing area of 1920 by 804, which is 1,543,680, with letterboxes on the top and bottom of the screen. Now, I'm not making a judgment here either way. I just think it's interesting that 4:3 is actually more active pixels than 2.40 when fit into a standard HD TV. Now, I say most of the MCU because WandaVision uses a bunch of different aspect ratios. Hey, Editor Steven here. I realized I forgot to put a spoiler warning for WandaVision in the script, so spoiler warning for WandaVision. I also think you just need to have seen the show to understand some of the points that I'm making. Anyway, back to presenter me. For its 50s, 60s, and 70s eras, it's 4:3, which is evocative of the television standard of those days. But for the 80s through the aughts, it's 16:9, which is anachronistic to those television eras, but is reminiscent of the HD remasters we have of these shows that are available to us today. The reason they're available to us is because many of them were shot on 35mm or Super 16, and those images can be rescanned and recropped to fit a new format. Although sometimes you end up with crew or equipment or empty chairs being visible that wouldn't have been seen in the original 4:3 broadcast.
What are you doing? There's no more seats. There's a seat over there. Just scoot over. Go sit down. You're gonna get in trouble.
WandaVision then stays 16:9 through its modern era of television, but anything that's set in the real world, by real I mean the fictional world of the MCU outside of the Hex, that's 240, which is perfectly in line with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now there's a couple great moments in WandaVision as the letterbox morphs and squeezes us in and out of the television world that Wanda has constructed, the creative team opting not to hard cut between the two aspect ratios, but allowing the black bars on the sides to squeeze us and force us back into this unnatural world. And I think this works really well thematically as Wanda is bending reality around her and changing the world itself. She's also changing the way it's perceived by the audience. And what I like about it is it's such a no-brainer creative choice to format it like this. Of course your version of I Dream of Jeannie is going to be 4:3, because I Dream of Jeannie was 4:3. But from a thematic level, the idea that our literal window into the world is being manipulated by the main character just works really well for me. The letterbox has become much more commonplace in modern television presentation. As TVs have gotten wider, audiences have become more accustomed to the presence of letterboxes. Prestige television has opted to move to a more cinematic visual style, trying to look more like theatrical releases than anything from television's past. So Zack Snyder wanted to show his Justice League full frame. Marvel wants the MCU to be 240. The aspect ratio of a film is no longer a function of the film stock and the projectors used, but an artistic choice of the director. You're seeing it how the director intended. It's a creative choice. I used to despise vertical videos on phone, but I've come to learn and appreciate that when there is intention, a vertical format can have just as much visual interest as a horizontal one. But the key word there is intention. As we get further removed from the physical limitations of past technologies, the crop itself can be applied in more interesting and artistic ways. But wait a minute. This isn't how Zack Snyder intended audiences to see his version of Justice League. It was formatted like that for IMAX, a screen that's at least 70 feet wide and 50 feet tall. My television, my computer monitor, my phone, none of those are the format for which this was intended to be presented. None of those even come close to matching the visual awe of an IMAX screen. Once released into the wild, directors have no control over which device a viewer chooses to watch media on. Format is a variable output going to variable inputs, and there's no way to format every film for every option. Ultimately, choices get made somewhere along the lines, and even if you decide that yes, you will format your film 4:3, inevitably somebody somewhere out there will turn on that feature that stretches the image horizontally to fully fill a 16:9 frame and make everything look super squashed. Why is that a feature of televisions? Who thinks that's a better way to watch something? Who out there hates pillar boxes so much they'd rather make everything look as though it'd been run over by a steamroller? For all the creative choices in film, aspect ratio is both one which is completely within the filmmaker's control, but also completely dependent on the audience to pick the most appropriate viewing platform. Vertical videos can work when you watch them on a vertical phone, but to switch back and forth, well, just ask Quibi. 4:3 might work better in an IMAX theater, but is it the right choice for home consumption? Not many people complain that WandaVision spent half of its time 4:3 because its aspect ratio was specifically tied to the theme and plot of the show. 4:3 for 4:3's sake isn't an inherently better or worse artistic choice than 16:9 or 240, but in a world where most home setups are 16:9 or wider, the choice to go 4:3 needs intention and design beyond simply stating that this is the way it was intended to be seen when it wasn't. Hey, thank you for watching. If you want updates on upcoming videos or just my general thoughts, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ScreenCheatham. And to that end, we'll say those magic YouTube words. Please like and subscribe.